Hello, dearest of friends. We're now going to embark on a new project in our recordings. It's something I've been thinking about and working on for a while, and it's called Profiles in 2x2s, where we're going to give a vignette of a particular 2x2, what their life was like, and how it was impacted by the 2x2s and so forth. And what they are later in their life, what their career is, and so forth. And I may focus on a particular person, or I may create a collage of 3 or 4 or 5 people. But I'm trying to give you an idea of what the lives are for 2x2s, because I don't think it's the way I've described it in some of my other videos is, let's say, tactile enough for people to understand. I need to give you some examples. So today I'm going to start off with I want to say it's a salacious example, but it's a real example. It's real. And this is a young man. I mean, he's now probably in his 40s, maybe even, 40s. And his life began in a U.S. state. He was born to two parents who were former 2x2 ministers. In fact, his father had been a prominent 2x2 minister. I can't remember how many years his parents were ministers, but the father was definitely a minister for longer than the mother. And this man was born to these people. Now, he had a sister, I believe, also. The father and mother, because they were 2x2 ministers previously, obviously they were held in great esteem by the 2x2 members in the community they now lived. Right? These people, his parents they remained 2x2s. They just were no longer ministers. And I can't remember why the father stopped being a minister. Probably because he wanted to have sex with someone. Probably, I guess. Anyways, these two parents were hyper 2x2s in the sense that they restricted the children from any sorts of non 2x2 activity. They filled the children's lives 100% with only 2x2. Okay. What does that mean? Well, obviously, no television, no radio, no books that are not related to 2x2s. Well, there's no books. 2x2s don't have books, but I mean, so there are some books that are allowed within a 2x2 system for children, like Archie comics, for example. So, but a bunch of other things that normal kids would have, these children were not allowed. No sports, of course, no after school activities, no drama club, whatever. None of it, basically zero interaction with children outside of the 2x2s, except that which is mandated by the state, which is to attend public school. Okay, so that's basically it. It was almost a reticence. Okay, and the father and mother were taking these children to 2x2 meetings and conventions far afield, as many as possible. Bible studies every night in the home or ones with the other 2x2s, learning to play the piano so they could play only 2x2 hymns. I mean, it was a full blown indoctrination for these children. Okay. So when these children reached school, this boy, his earliest memories are of being bullied. Okay. So the first thing his memory is of school is being bullied. And in fact, his parents, of course, were abusive also. His father was very abusive, both physically and emotionally, psychologically, with children. And they were terrorizing the children with, if you don't do all these 2x2 things, you're going to be struck down by lightning. God will forever, you'll get no salvation, blah, 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 blah. All these bad things are going to happen to you. You'll be struck down and killed. So But when the kid gets to school, he starts getting bullied. Okay, now, why do you suppose he was being bullied at school? Well, because he was a weirdo. That's why. And why was he a weirdo? Because his parents had turned him into a weirdo by making it impossible for him to relate to other children. He was completely improperly socialized by his parents. He had no idea how to relate to other children in terms of what the children were talking about, Hot Wheels cars or whatever the toys were the kids were into in that time frame or whatever was going on. This kid, it was like Greek to him. He had no idea what was going on. He was a complete outsider. And so what do kids do? They ostracized him. They bullied him, right? And of course, do you think his parents were interested in making this boy into physically fit? No, 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 no. That, of course, that's not a two by two uh, goal. No sports, no physical activity other than what's required if you work on a farm or something. But no, there's no sense in teaching this kid how to defend himself or to be good at sports or anything like that, where he might have gained some acceptance from the other children. No, that didn't happen. So this boy, what do you think then later happened in his childhood? Of course, the other children started calling him names. And one of the names they lit upon, which was common in the 1980s, uh, to call boys who were not, didn't fit in, was faggot. So this boy was called faggot. Kicked, punched. He basically used it as a punching bag for the other boys. And so he didn't know what the word faggot meant. But obviously, he realized he must be faggot because that's all the other boys are calling him that. And the only time he gets any attention from other boys is when they come to call him faggot. So he thinks he must be. He doesn't know what it is, but he must be it. So fast forward, he's into his teens. He's still totally ostracized. Now the girls don't even want anything to do with him, right? They don't see him as someone they want around because he's if you have him around you, you're not going to be able to attract boys, right? So he's totally a loner, right? He's a loner. And maybe he can go and sit with some fat kids at the lunch table, but even they don't really want him around because he's faggot, right? Now, has he engaged in any sexual activity? No, but he's faggot apparently. Well, the thing is, you'd think by now he would have figured out that this two by two cult is, probably not so good for him. But no, he continues on in it. He continues on in it. And of course, his desire to be with boys, because he's been totally, you know, restricted from doing that his entire childhood. So the thing that's most important to him as a child, which is being restricted. So he starts to try to get around boys, right? He's fantasizing about boys, anything he can do. But he knows that these sorts of thoughts that are coming in his head, sexualized thoughts about boys, is verboten by the two by two doctrine. And his father has made it very clear that there will be no homos in the house. And so he is, of course, boy is starting to think he's in a jam, right? Here he is. So he already just hates his father quite a bit because the father has been physically abusive to him for forever. And now his identity that he's coming into being is to be homosexual male. His father is opposed to that in a major way. Right? So he feels totally trapped, but he knows or he thinks that he has to continue in the two by twos, otherwise he'd be struck down by lightning and he won't go to heaven and all this other stuff the two by twos have convinced him. And this went on for this poor man until he was in his 30s. In his 30s. He was a failure of all forms, I guess you could say. He lived at home with his parents his whole time, had some odd jobs, but mostly unemployed, until he finally got the courage up to go to college. And when he did that, he decided he wanted to take some courses to find out if God was whatever. He took biology courses basically, and he, through taking the biology courses and fooling around on the internet. By that time, the internet was a bigger deal. He came to the idea that the two by two system was wrong because atheism was the case. In his mind, he believed atheism was the case, and therefore two by twos were wrong. Now, he also started making friends when he was at college because now, it's like a second chance, right? None of the people at college knew his background or knew anything about him. He could reinvent himself. And at that also, homosexuality was more accepted at this time and at college and so forth. And so he started making homosexual friends. And what happened is that effectively it's called trauma bonding, where people who've had this sort of trauma in their childhood, they bond with other people who've had the same type or whatever, same kind of form of trauma, right? And they coalesce around it, and they coalesce around an identity associated with that. In this case, this man's identity was initially homosexual and then transsexual. Okay, so he started dressing as a woman and believing that that would make him happy. That would finally solve all the problems that he had, that his whole life was all the issues was the fact that he actually was a woman who had been born in a man's body. And if he could just change that, happiness would come to him. The fact that he'd never had any happiness in his life would finally uh, end, and he would become a happy person. Now, do you think that's happened? I mean, of course, it hasn't happened. He has become a transsexual. He has completed his university degree. He still lives with his parents. Actually, his father's dead now. But he is a very, very unhappy person. And he's not a two by two, obviously, anymore. His mother remains a two by two. But you can see through this path that the issue is that if you create these horrific childhood home lives, which is so common with two by twos, that these things happen. One of the things he's said is that his father was one of these two by two nutters who would beat the children before the age of 3 so that they would have no memories of the beatings, but they also would be conditioned to be submissive. He said he saw that repeatedly, and he heard his father talking about how his father had done that to him, quite proudly, in fact. And so my point is, if you want to create some really, let's say, horribly messed up people, just put them into two by twos. Just raise them into two by twos. This is an example of what can happen. Now, this man, he hasn't committed suicide, which is remarkable because there's a significant number of other two by two people who are raised two by twos who have committed suicide. In fact, there are 2 boys who committed suicide in California maybe 10, 15 years ago. And they specifically wrote in their suicide note, they did it because of the 2 by 2s, because they're being forced in whether crazy parents. Now, there's a whole bunch of other people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who've been raised in 2 by 2s who are also totally messed up, but they, trudge along. And some of them got out of the 2 by 2s and are still, but remain very damaged. And there's others who remain in the 2 by 2s and don't understand where the cause of their damage came from. They're still trapped within the system. It's awful. So that was the vignette for today, and we'll hopefully have some more in the future when we get a chance. Thank you.